What's up, everyone? Welcome back, and welcome to those that are new to the channel's MLB The Show 23 franchise. If you haven't already guessed, we will be taking over the Baltimore Orioles. But before we get into it, I want to give you a tip for starting your franchise. A lot of times there will be lowly rated players on the 40-man roster that will definitely not be making the team, or a younger talent that will use up their options too quickly before they develop. So here's how you can fix that. First, you'll go in and load the roster you want to use, then head to the Create tab and click on Roster Control. From there, you can click on the Roster Control box and go to the team you will be using, the Orioles in this case, and go to Manage Roster. From there, you can go through and pick your players. If they are on the Major League roster, they must be moved down to AAA or lower to be actually removed from the 40-man roster. So, for instance, say we want to remove Gunnar Henderson from the 40-man, either to keep his options until he develops or open a spot for someone else without having to use an option before starting the series. First, you move him down to AAA, and then we can remove him from the 40-man roster. Easy peasy. So then you can back out, and you may have some errors like we do from our lineups now, but press square to auto fix those. They can be fixed in your franchise, and then don't forget to save that roster and load it up when you start your franchise. And now back to what was voted on by you guys and those on the MLB The Show subreddit. Our franchise features the Orioles. They have a good defense and a lot of speed, but are in the middle of the road or worse in every other category. So I feel like this gives us a decent starting point to rebuild without it being too difficult. The only settings to change will be the GM contracts will be off, so that we don't get fired after 3 years if you haven't succeeded in rebuilding. And we'll have full control over everything to make sure the CPU doesn't add people to the 40-man or make call-ups of trades we don't want. And I always like to start in spring training so I can see how the guys are playing and make my own opening day roster and lineups depending on their performances. So maybe we have a spring training standout that deserves to be on the roster opening day. And speaking of the roster, I'm excited about this team. We have a lot of youth to build around, and there aren't many guys over 30 years old. Starting pitcher Kyle Gibson is 35. There's a few very good youngsters with high potential, and the next oldest player is starting second baseman Adam Frazier at 31. Going position by position, I'm mainly going to run through our younger talent, and we start with 23-year-old right-handed pitcher Grayson Rodriguez, a 77 overall, a potential fireballer with good break. He has no MLB service time, but I look for him to be our ace in a year or two, and I will make an effort to get down and play some minor league player lot games to highlight some of these other pitching and position prospects that we have that are B potential or higher that I cover that aren't on the major league roster. Our reliever position is dire to say the least, so no one with B potential or higher and no one over a 76 overall. We have some youth, but maybe we can look in free agency before we start spring training to try and bring in at least one arm to bolster the group. But what we lack there, we make up for with our closer. 27-year-old Felix Bautista, one of the better closers in the game. He'll come in handy if we actually find ourselves in save situations. He was 15 for 17 in his opportunities last year, so hopefully he isn't wasted with us. Catcher is a position we shouldn't have to worry about at all with one of the MLB's young stars in Adley Rutschman. 25 years old, a switch hitter, and a premium fielder. His only flaws is hitting against lefties, but maybe he can prove that as the series progresses. He hit .254 last year with 13 homers in only 113 games, and he'll be one of our building blocks going forward with this team. And we have another young catcher on the roster, only a C potential, but at 18 years old and 62 overall, Samuel Basallo could see the field in a couple of years. He'll need to improve his hitting, but can make a solid second catcher, and he'll be starting the season on the AAA squad. Ryan Mountcastle holds down first base at only 26 years old, and with A potential, he's another piece for us to build on. He's a good hitter and a serviceable fielder. He's averaging .261 for his career and hit 22 dingers last season, so we'll look for him to grow into one of the best first basemen in the league. Depth behind him is limited, but Lewin Diaz is there at 26 years old also. He's a straight power bat, which his lineup needs, but I doubt he'll be making the opening day roster as he is under the Mendoza line for his career. At the Keystone, we have the veteran and former Gold Glove winner Adam Frazier. He's a solid contact hitter and has a lot of utility that we may utilize this season. I'm not sure where he stands on our roster after that, but the position is his to lose right now on the team. He is making $8 million, so he may become some trade bait near the deadline if the team falls too far behind and we can get some youngsters kind of playing in his spot. There's not much depth behind him though, but 25-year-old Terran Vavra is getting a spring training invite. An average fielder with a bit of speed. We'll need his bat to come around for him to see the bigs aside from any injuries to starters. Starting at the hot corner is Ramon Urias. 26-year-old has B potential, is an average hitter and an elite fielder. He slugged 16 home runs last season, which isn't too bad, but we would like to see some improvement from the 248 average he had. And another young infielder with a spring training invite, Jordan Westberg, is 24 years old and has B potential. His ratings are kind of average across the board, but he can play other infield positions, so we'll see how he does in spring and see if anything stands out. And even lower in the farm system, we have Kobe Mayo. He's only 21 years old, B potential, good size, and his arm stands out, but he'll have a lot of time to hopefully develop into a good player for us. At shortstop, we have a lot of talent at all levels, and I'm kind of struggling with the direction to take the position. First up is Gunnar Henderson, 21 years old, and he is a stud. While he's facing righties, he's a 5-tool player, but left-handed pitchers give him a bit of trouble. He played a bit last year, only 34 games, but he slashed 259, 348, 440, so not bad for a 21-year-old kid. I want him to play, but do we put him in a platoon with Jorge Mateo? The 27-year-old is slightly better at handling lefties and has tons of speed and defensive ability. It would be a shame for him not to get on the field and waste that athleticism. He does have more utility than Henderson, so we could find a spot in the lineup if others struggle during the season as well. Next man up is Jackson Holliday, son of Matt Holliday. I told you we were deep at this position. At only 19, he already is rated the nicest overall, 69, and has the potential to become a 5-tool player if we stay patient. Maybe he could take over for Adam Frazier at second base. And finally, our last shortstop prospect, Joseph Ortiz, 24 years old, 64 overall, B potential. He's a solid contact hitter with a good glove. Think a younger Adam Frazier, and I can see him becoming a utility infielder for us in the future. And now moving on to the outfield, Austin Hazen left, 27-year-old, is just a solid overall player. Some hitting ability, some fielding, a great arm, which I love in the outfield, and a bit of speed, but nothing to scare a catcher. He's a career 257 hitter, and we'll look for him to get back to his 2021 form where he hit 22 homers and drove in 71 runs, but I'd prefer his average to be more like his 2019 campaign. Behind Hayes, there's not much there, and it's a position we could bring someone in or scout for the draft. In center field, Cedric Mullins is one of the stars of this team. He's a guy that can pretty much do it all in the outfield and in the batter's box, and he'll be batting leadoff for us as long as he stays in town. He hit 30 ding-dongs in 2021, which seems to be an outlier, but I'll temper my expectations just a bit short of his 2021 season. Getting a spring training invite is 23-year-old Colton Cowser. He needs some work with his bat, but I feel confident he can make the big league team within 3 years, and he'll most likely start out being our AAA center fielder. Anthony Santander is our starting right fielder. 27-year-old is a switch hitter and can hit with power from both sides of the plate. He lacks speed and fielding ability and makes up for that with a pretty good arm. Just don't expect him to get too many outfield assists. I'd like for him to hit with a bit of a higher average this season, but if he can get 30 bombs and 100 RBIs, I'll take that trade-off. Interestingly enough, he hits better when the bases are empty. Go figure. Waiting in the wings is real-life spring training standout Heston Kjerstad. He's only a 64 overall and has some work to do to up his batting ability, but he's getting invited to spring training to see what he can do. And if he needs some work in AAA, I'm prepared to have Nomar Mazar make the Major League roster, depending on how his spring goes. With his 72 clutch rating, he'll mainly be an emergency pinch hitter and off-day player if need be, while we let Kjerstad get some at-bats in the minors. And Mazar is still fairly young. Maybe he can get back to his 2016 to 2019 form when he was with the Rangers. And lastly, I want to look at a few free agents. Now, what I won't do is go through and sign all of the high potential 18 to 20-year-olds, at least not in this first year. I know we're not going to be a great team, but I want to see where this team stands right now with what we have. Maybe we'll do that next year to build up this farm system. And a starting pitcher, I'm not really seeing much that would help us out. I think our biggest need is reliever, and I don't see much here to give us much more help either. With our current players, I'm looking for more 70+ ratings, and I'm not really getting it, but if I go to closer, I see someone I would like to bring on, Ken Giles. He's 32 years old, but still has some very solid ratings and would come in being one of our top relievers. Between his last 2 Major League seasons, he only played in 9 games. He had Tommy John surgery in 2021, and I feel like taking a chance on a low-risk, high-reward pitcher like him could be the move for us. The other guys here are just a bit too young for me to want to go after in this first year of the series. And if we want to get some first base help and some power at DH or off the bench, Miguel Sano is there, but I'm okay waiting and seeing with Diaz. But I have done my due diligence and scoured for hours and hours looking at free agents, and I know he is currently on a team, but Yerkes and Profar is someone that I would like to add. He's a super utility that can pretty much play everywhere except catcher. He's a switch hitter. He's not a liability in the field. He most likely won't play as much as he did with the Padres, but he'll probably be the first off the bench and the first to replace an injured player. So yeah, I think next episode, the first thing I'll do is sign Ken Giles and Profar. I want this series to, just like all of my others, to remain fairly realistic. So let me know what you guys think of those moves and my reasonings behind it, if you agree or not. And then we'll go through spring training, checking on stats as we go along, getting some guys playing time to see what they have, and give you a feel of how this series will go and get into the opening day game to finish it off. And after that next episode, I do want to try and go through the series fairly quickly. Shooting for at least an episode a week, but I want to cover a month or two at a time, playing some player lock games, some critical situations, some full game highlights for y'all, and we'll also get to see some players coming up through our farm system, which means the episodes may get a little long, but I'll try to condense as much as I can. And my playstyle, I'm not playing with a PCI while batting or with an accuracy or pitching or throws, so players' ratings will play more of a factor into how they actually play, and I want the players to determine how well the team plays rather than my input. You saw in the intro for a couple of hits how my camera is set up for hitting. I've been using that for a few years in these games, and I just enjoy seeing the players actually bat instead of, a giant square in the center of the screen for a strike zone. I'll be using the broadcast camera for pitching and using Hall of Fame difficulty for both, so this won't be an easy series to win by any means. But that'll wrap up this intro. I hope you all enjoyed me running down the team, kind of highlighting starters and young talent. Please like the video if you did, and consider subscribing if you want to see more. Comment your thoughts on the first episode, and I'm going to be letting it go for a couple of days before recording the next episode to get some of your opinions in this video. And I hope you all join me for that one as we get the season started and rebuild the Baltimore Orioles into an AL East powerhouse eventually. Goodbye, everyone.